CSZ D&I Talks features the use of adult language and discussion of serious topics that may be new for certain viewers. Please be advised.
All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of Comedy Sports Chicago's D&I Talks with your host, me, Luis Cortez, a longtime comedy sports player and now Chicago's Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Now, we started this show a few months back, not only to introduce you to our ensembles, but also to introduce you to their stories and their experiences within not just the comedy sports world, but the improv world in general. But now we're starting to move out of not just the one-on-ones, but also, as you can see, I'm starting to bring a mighty collection of our improvisers together, and we're trying to attack certain topics as a group, and start to move away from, not move away, but spread out from the one-on-ones, and actually start engaging as a group. And so today, as you can see, I have a mighty group with me today, and let me introduce them all one by one. Let me start with a member of our rec league. He is a member of the team Unreal. It is Aaron Paulson with us today. We also have another member of our rec league with us. They are a member of the team 8-7 Central. Please welcome Thomas P. Clune. And of course, a member of our main ensemble with us today, we have Kelsey Myers. Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
So good. Hi, awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm really glad you're all here today. As we are now in the middle of Pride Month, as we are also, we're getting out there, we're celebrating, but I think now is also a good time to attack a lot of themes and ideas that I think we've always kind of like talked in small bunches here and there, like in the green room or, after a show or something like that. But now I really want to start talking more publicly about these sort of things. And one of the things I want to talk about today are the idea of stereotypes. Stereotypes on stage, whether they are presented, at you or whether you are asked to play them because of how you present yourself, or, however the idea of stereotypes presents itself within your improv experiences is kind of what I want to attack today. Because I think, before I go into any of my thoughts, let me just go ahead and first things first, before we go deep into this, why don't we go around the circle and tell me when it was how long it's been since you've been involved in comedy sports, like kind of how you started coming in, whether it be through classes or you auditioned in or whatever. Let me start with Aaron.
Hi, yes. I took the advanced classes at Comedy Sports. I was able to take level 1 and 3 sessions of level 2 before everything shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I am relatively, even though I've been with Comedy Sports for a year and a half, I still feel relatively new to it. And I have been with Rec League since they did their online auditions last summer, I think.
Okay, cool. Let's go to Thomas.
I started out as an intern 5 years ago, and then have held various different positions and done different things throughout all of Comedy Sports Chicago.
Yeah, I think you and I kind of came into the picture around the same time, because I popped in around like May of 2016 or something like that.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later.
I'm pretty sure I took your spot on Chimera when you got on the ensemble.
How dare you? Kelsey.
I lose track of the year. I think 2016, 2017, I started doing Rec League now is what it's called, Rec League, and did that for a couple years and then did minor league for a year. And then got on the ensemble, this last fall. So, hey, here we are. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Great. So let me toss it over to y'all in regards to, the setup of today's discussion. Any initial thoughts to kick us off?
I'll kick us off.
There you go.
I think a lot of the stereotypes and things that we see happening on stage tend to be things that are happening off stage that are gone unchecked. or that people are not talking about off stage when the problematic things happen, and then they appear on stage. And that's kind of just like by the nature of things, of how things are reduced to an instant or a moment in the few minutes that you have that scene. And then it's even more difficult, I think, to talk about them afterwards if it's been going on and a consistent thing that has not been addressed for a long time. Talking about it in the middle of an art form when it's intertwined with real life stereotypes, it becomes a thing that's harder to address.
You know, as I have more and more of these discussions, that specific idea presents itself over and over and over, which is just the idea of, because we don't talk about it, when it does present itself, we don't know what to do. So, you know, most of us just kind of freeze in that moment because how do we handle this?
Yeah.
No, we don't talk about it.
On stage too, our responses must be limited for a theater that is all ages as well, because some reaction might be to be, you know, swear word, that's rude in the middle of a scene. When I come from Vermont, and I did comedy over there as well, and it has happened before where somebody said something that was not great, like in a jam or whatever, and you can throw out the yes and for a little bit and react sort of honestly. And sometimes that includes things that wouldn't work maybe in an all ages show. So there's extra restraints as well.
So you think the fact that this is an all ages show limits how you can respond to these sort of things?
Well, maybe, I mean, it has happened on stage before where somebody did something to me that I didn't appreciate, and I was able to, within the scene, express myself in a way that might have included bad words or you know, you name it. So just having a little more tact might, you know, happen. It might have to happen here.
I'm just like one of those people where like most of my improv training is just like I took classes and still do like workshops and stuff, but like a lot of my improv is very much like, what would a conversation in real life, if this were real, but it's all fake, which is another reason why stereotypes and improv are garbage, because none of this is real. Mm-hmm. It's like, just my initial reaction, and like I've had countless times where people put me in very inappropriate stereotypes, and I just like, the minute you do that, that person does not care about being appropriate or being kind or being respectful. And so I'm not gonna like cuss them out because like we don't need that, you know, but I want to so bad. But I'm always just like, oh, if you're gonna play that game, I'm gonna say something back, and I'm not gonna allow that to happen, because if I don't, that rest of that improv set, it's gonna be so sticky and gross. And it's that sweet spot and balance of finding a way to be like smart and also like, hey, I'm not trying to derail this scene, but like, how can I in an improv vocab, like find the game of making it so like, oh, this is a joke, but like afterwards I'm going to talk to you like, mm-hmm. Don't ever do that again. But I always like to say, hey, you want to play that game with me? Like, game on. Like, I'll end it really quick.
And I think what a lot of, at least for me, what this comes down to is that in all of our improv training, we're designed to focus in and be present in that moment. And when we experience stereotypes, particularly negative stereotypes that are addressed at something that is so personal as our identity, it takes us out of that moment, even for an instance, and no longer allows us the opportunity to continue to improvise. We have to go and have that dual action of, I need to handle this as a human being, and I need to handle this as an improviser. And you're literally splitting your brain into two different spots, trying to figure out what is the safest path in that very particular moment, and what is the most appropriate path as an improviser to continue on doing the performance that you're doing, so that we can have this very real conversation at a later date, even if it's immediately after the show, if that's what's a necessary thing to have happen. But the fact that we have to pull ourselves out to kind of balance that point on what is the most appropriate thing that we can do to say removes us from actually doing the best improv that we can do because of this negative stereotype that has been addressed or just bestowed upon us without our consent.
I would even almost argue that when something like that happens, it pushes you out of your focus.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are things that can kind of like pull you out, but this is a push.
Your fight or flight kicks in, and you're like, "Oh my God, what do I do?"
And like the way you describe it, like it is an advanced improv move to have to like, I need to pull myself back into focus, react to what just happened, respond to what just happened, and also do it in such a way that you understand that what just happened was not okay, but not derail what's happening. And remember that we're going to talk about this later, and still be able to go, ta-da, at the end of that. And it's just like, that is, I mean, we're balancing enough without feeling like I have to watch out for those sort of moves and how I'm going to respond to them so that it doesn't hurt your feelings.
Yeah,
and hopefully
I think that,
sorry, go ahead, Kelsey.
I was just gonna say that's like, I think the biggest dangers of learning improv and learning what yes and is you are taught from the very beginning to accept whatever you are given and then to add on to it. But when you are given something that's inappropriate, it took me a really long time to learn it's not accepting, like, how do I word this? It took me a long time to realize it's not like, yes, that is so true, or more so of just being like, nope, that is a reality that we live in, but you can add on something else as well. That's not necessarily, you don't have to agree to everything or say, you can say no. You can say no, but yes, the way they teach you yes and is so much like, you have to accept this and you don't have time to. But I think that's what makes, a good improviser, and more importantly, a good human, is learning how to be like, I didn't like that, and let's escalate that and talk about that and make it so it's fun for everyone, including the audience, who's like, what the hell just happened?
Why do you think people feel comfortable throwing these sort of stereotypes around, like on stage? Like why do you think this happens?
How long do we have?
I mean, I'd love to hear. Because each and every single one of you reacted to that. I mean, there was general like shift in every screen. I will play that back so people see it. Why do you think people feel comfortable throwing these sort of stereotypes around, like on stage? Like what? Why? But Aaron, go for it.
Well, I can speak to just myself and the stereotypes that are thrust upon me because I'm a more effeminate presenting gay man. I feel like oftentimes I'm perceived as being game for something really sometimes sexual, that people will come up to me and touch me in ways that are not cool because they're like, oh, look at him, he loves it. And I feel like the reason people might do that is maybe back in Vermont, there just aren't a ton of people that move around like me on stage or something. But to have people who are on stage improvising so openly and loudly feels like something maybe new that somebody who's not within that community can like interact with and like test things out on. And so that might be why they do it. It also could just be bigotry that they haven't checked and haven't realized that they're just letting it drop out of their mouths. Yeah, there's many sides to it.
Kelsey?
I always say, your insecurities are not my problem, and insecurities always speak louder than words. And when people's egos are threatened and their intelligence are threatened, they want to hurt people immediately. And similar to what Thomas was saying, when that's not checked in the real world, and that like, oh, I don't need to improve anymore, I'm already here, and then that gets threatened in an improv sense, and then you add the pressure and excitement of performing, it just projects onto everyone that is around them. And I say it again for the people at home, your insecurities are not my problem. Leave that at the door. I do not have time to hurt other people because, you know, I don't know any better, or I refuse to learn or grow more. Like, that's so gross, to put it lightly. So I think it's a big of like insecurity, like people just lack intelligence, and it's gone unchecked for so long that they don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know that it's not an excuse, but they just don't even know they're being jerks.
I mean, that is so very true. Personally, I can think back to like, because I don't even know how to even explain it, but I, I, I was different. I wish I had the words for it, but
Okay.
something made everyone seem like, what's up with this guy? But whatever it was, it caused people to emasculate me. And my reaction to that was to like bro up and react in what now I look back in a really negative way, trying to prove how manly I was. And that spilled onto the stage with how I played. And like Thomas said, like, it goes unchecked because we don't talk about it. And as you were saying, Kelsey, like, so I was just like, this must be okay. Everyone seems okay with this. No one's saying anything. So full steam ahead. Like, it led to some bad behavior. It was not healthy for me to go that unchecked. Once finally people started like, hey, is when I was like, oh, shit. Okay. I got to be a good person.
Yeah, you like overcorrected in the wrong direction by like kind of being that bad improviser who overexerted themselves over others.
I overcorrected so hard. It like embarrassingly hard.
Yeah, and I think there comes like a time too, like being secure in yourself. And I think the person I am today is a lot different than the person I was when I first started improv, even a year ago. And it's going to be different than the person I will be tomorrow or a year from now. And I think being secure in yourself and who you are and who your identity is, and even knowing that that might change in an hour, in a day, in a year, but just being secure in that, and then also understanding that like other people are on their journey too, it shows. And I try my hardest not to put people into stereotypes because I know what that feels like to be in an improv scene and be like, well, as the doctor, and have some cis man look at me and be like, you're not a doctor, you're a nurse and you know it, and be like, what the fuck? Like, why would, no. But now, you know, that made me, it still makes me mad, but I love when that happens now, because then I get to be like, oops.
Yeah.
Oops, I'm gonna drag you and it's gonna be great. But I just, it sucks. And I'm sure I hopefully I have never put someone in that situation, but like, I'm not perfect either. And like you said, Luis, it's like when have those moments of like, I have to fill in the shoes that other people expect of me, that insecurity just comes off, and it's just like, oh, it just digs a hole. It's terrible.
And it's funny because when you really think about it, you're you're definitely limiting yourself when you play with just what you're seeing in front of you. It's like, this person could be anything and everything in the whole wide world. That's why we do this. And you decide to just like, this is a woman can't be a doctor. It's like, really, man? You could have gone with dragons and you went with that.
That's what I'm saying, is this is make believe. Nothing is real. And you're a talking dog, and we've got like a baby hydra in the corner, and I can't be a doctor because I'm a woman.
It's
like,
gonna be at least semi-realistic. Come on.
I mean, I was at one point, sure. But I think that also goes back into like a lot of representation in theater, in art, and performing in general is very cis, is very straight, is very white, is very like, you look at it, and so people are used to performing with other people that are like white or cis or straight, and a lot of men are, and it's just like, if you don't have representation in there, people like they freak out. It's like you have to diversify your friend groups and your professional settings and the movies you watch and the people you support on the internet. Like you have to just do better, because that will show in your everyday life, in your improv life. And we're all getting better at it. We're all doing what we can, but it's like, you know, some people it's like, come on, get up to speed.
I mean, there was definitely a time where I would lean into it just because I was like, all right, I guess, like, for the bit, but it never felt good.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while for me to eventually, like, work up the confidence on stage to be able to be like, no, we're not doing that. And I think comedy sports allowed me a little bit more freedom in that, because it's so, like, broken up and, like, here's a game here and here's a game here and here's a game here. So in those times where that would present itself to me, it was easy to just, before the scene, oh, we're going to blah, blah, blah. No, we're not going to do that. Oh, okay. Like, we're going to do this. Because I wouldn't just throw that out and just stare and be quiet. I'd be like, what about this? Like, let me give you an alternative so we're not all just deer in headlights. But not everyone has that freedom. So how do people protect themselves from that without having to, like, make themselves the punching bag?
I don't think there's necessarily a best or a good answer to that particular kind of question. I think there are good paths to go, but I think it's still, especially in the performance or even all art form world that we do, it's so dynamic that everything is changing and our best practices are being altered all the time on how we even approach not just this type of stereotype topic, but through all of diversity and how we handle about all different kind of things that were very standardized in like the 90s and early 2000s and are just like, oh, that was really terrible the way that we handled all of things. Some theaters used to specifically have exercises where you would kind of look at a person and describe what kind of character they would be based off of what they look like, which is always terrible. IO specifically they wanted you separated by the gender of which you were assigned at birth in classes as part of their curriculum. And like, if anyone called them out on that, they would not go and budge or move. And when you're the only representation of that kind of person in the room and there is no diversity except for a single person, then there's no diversity. Because if that person isn't supported when they're spoken out against this type of thing, then you don't have any kind of weight or any kind of power to make any impact or change, or to go and grow and be any kind of thing of which is welcoming to the only people except the people who have power and control. And you have to be the people who are underrepresented groups and the people who are the recipient of those kind of underrepresented people and people who are experiencing that trauma is really what it is. It needs to be the people who take the power, who take the power within the groups to stand up and say, hey, this is negatively impacting us. Now, if that theater, that organization, that teacher, anything else doesn't want to do anything about it, then you probably shouldn't be there, because they're never going to change and listen. Like, there may be a time in the future that it's going to be different, but that's not your responsibility to do so. It's up to a larger organization. The people in power need to go and relinquish that power. And the only way that they're going to be doing it is the people who don't have that power, or the oppressed people, are going to be able to take it away from them.
I mean, yeah, 100%. And I think too, like, on that, like with both of those things, like, it just takes one person to say something and to stand up and put their foot down to encourage other people to join them. So like, if I was watching that show, Luis, or if I was in that class with you, Thomas, and like, I saw you, Luis, being like, I'm not going to do that in a performance setting, like as an audience member, like anywhere, but like my immediate response as an audience member, I would have been like, cool, you can do that. And it's just that simple of, no. and moving on. And you don't have to make a big, I don't know, who cares? There's no right or wrong way to stand up for what you believe in and be respectful. But like, that is inspiring in itself, because so many people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing. That's another, trauma response. Like we said, it's just like, it's so hard, but it's like the minute I see someone else do it, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
I mean, the fact that someone would see that and have the thought of like, you can do that, immediately just says like, what are we not telling people in class to, to protect themselves? And, and not necessarily like when you're out there, this is going to happen, but just to, empower them at least to be able to like control that moment and how they feel like they want to control that moment. I think is probably a better way of phrasing that. But, it's just something that, like you said, they ask us to just like, you got to just yes and what's happening and just roll along with it. And then
for the longest time, most of the people who took improv, that's all that they needed to really ever do to feel safe and secure on stage. But there's a lot of people who are not able to just yes and their way into an awesome, life in improv because we have to deal with stuff that we've been talking about. And it was a very illuminating moment for me when I took a workshop that talked about this very thing, where it was like, we as queer people are allowed to encouraged. We're the masters of our domain when we're on the improv stage. We are allowed to take control. We're allowed to say, this is not okay with me. This choice that you made makes me feel awful and I don't like it, and we're going to do something else. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, why has nobody taught me this before? Like, I didn't realize I was allowed to do this. This is amazing. This needs to be a part of the conversation in classes that aren't just like this really awesome workshop at a comedy festival that I went to that only 4 people were at. This could be just a part of curriculums.
Who would have thought it should have been sprinkled in literally everywhere?
Yeah.
And then like, it's like, Jason made a comment during the 9:30 show last night, mentioning how it was like the Pride match, but he was like, also, it's just a normal match, as it should. Like, yes, we are celebrating Pride, and it's awesome we have these things very specifically. And I know, Luis, we have talked about this like concept a lot, where it's like, yes, we are showcasing this group of people, and that's awesome. But also, it's just a normal show with normal people, and shows should always be showcasing this point of view, and we should always be sprinkling in this inclusivity and showcasing people from all different walks of life, representing all different genders and whatever. It's amazing.
When I took over and started doing like the community specific shows, I made it a point to have, whenever refs were talking about it, I made it a point to tell them, like, mention it at the top, mention it once, and that's it. Because my idea was essentially like, by the end of the show, I just want people walking out thinking like, that's a great show. As opposed to like, and they're all POC, you say? Wow. Good for them.
Yeah.
Like you can have a Black History Month show.
Yeah.
Any day.
It's like, and they're all gay? Wow, bless their little hearts. Wow, like...
Well, like, first of all, bless our hearts right now, first of all. But I just say, bless our hearts.
Can we bless our little hearts real quick?
Our little hearts.
Yeah.
But essentially, like, my thinking was just like, mention it at the top because I do want it spotlit, but also enjoy the show. It's just a show.
And I think that speaks a lot to how stereotypes of queer people are depicted in all media, particularly like movies and television. There's a very limited number of ways that they are depicted, and they're almost never in a positive light, or they're coming out stories, or they're hiding your identity stories, or other types of different things that are stresses. Rather than, here's a bunch of queer people that are just putting off doing laundry one more day. Because guess what? Like, and that, like, but so few times are we, like, when it's like identified in a scene that, happens to be a queer couple, it becomes about that identity rather than just a facet of that person's life. There's so many people out there that are not even afforded the opportunity to be queer and other things because of how people are viewed as queer people. Queer people can be very religious as well. You can, do all of these things. They are not exclusive to one another. But a lot of times is, particularly in comedy, because the how comedy is mechanically made is that you are reducing that in an instant, in a second. And so you're not given the full picture. And then what happens often in queer stories and queer identities is that it's not reducing it as a whole, it is reducing it to a singularity about being queer rather than a human that happens to be queer. And then it becomes solely about the struggle within society that doesn't accept queer people and that queer person's struggle in that world rather than that queer person in a world.
It's funny. I just did had a chat with Jason where that exact same idea came up, and then we actually also did a chat in regards to like comedy sports and the community presenting itself and why there's not like a pushback but a bit of like hesitation towards it, and it all connects. It connects to this, and you're right. It's because people within like the mainstream media are presented with a very limited view, and it's because like that specific limited view is the different part of like this. That's the interesting part. Everything like you're 99.9 exactly like the rest of us, but this 0.1, oh boy, like, and so that's all they want to present, and so that's all people know, and so when they see someone within the community, they're just like, I know Will and Grace. It's like, I recently found out that Jason just told me that I guess within the show, Will never kissed an actual boyfriend until like the last season. Mm-hmm. Why was that a thing? Like, why wasn't it from the first episode? Who cares? It's a kiss. People kiss all the time.
I mean, look at where that show, it was so groundbreaking for its time. I mean, it's like insane to see these shows like from the 90s, and then they're like, oh, but it's a bunch of queer people. Isn't that great? And although it is, it's still like, you're doing the bare minimum. They're like, look what we did. And it's like, hey, you like, just, I go to the grocery store and I go get, I go to the beach and I hang out in bed and watch TikToks and I don't know, vacuum my house. I do very normal things.
Yeah, like if you really think about it, like every TV show and every movie ever is probably full of queer people.
Yeah.
Just that we don't walk around going, we're gay!
And I think there's like there's a happy medium there. It's like those stories do need to be told, I think. Like you thinking about those like super obvious like troubled stories about coming out or getting bullied, because that is a fact and we need to see that. But you can just tell a story like the Titanic could have been done with a bunch of queer people, like the Notebook could have been done with a bunch of queer people and it wouldn't have been any different. But it's like, it's just so, I find that happy medium too, because then also you see people like, well, Dumbledore was gay, and I'm like, okay, he didn't ever say it. It was like mentioned years ago that he was gay, and you're like, that's great.
That didn't come out until after the fact.
Right.
Which at the time I was just like, okay.
Exactly. But I think there's a happy medium there of like, you don't need to be like, as a gay woman, but you can be like, I don't know, show some casual representation, and it's, hey.
I really hope that someone out there was like, I knew it.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen, what is it, Prisoner of Azkaban?
See? Right here. I even circled it.
Prisoner of Azkaban, after he gives him the time turner, he's like, oh, what? Right then and there, I was like, he's gay.
In the movie?
You think the actor knew before J.K. Rowling did?
I feel like when you know, you know.
As this sort of this conversation translates specifically also to an improv scene where somebody is labeled, we are trained as improvisers to like kind of latch onto that first interesting weird thing and then build a scene off of that. And it is always shocking to me that for some people, them being my husband is the first weird thing.
Oh my God.
It's so it always throws me off. That's one of those things that's like, right, that for you is strange. Our existence is a little bit weird and exciting, and it's nothing to build a scene off of. Yeah.
That's not the game of the scene is not, being queer and, like having a husband or a wife or a partner, or being non-binary. Like, I've never had an issue with when someone, makes me a man in a scene,
Right.
or someone genderless. I've never had an issue with that. Because like we talked about earlier, I've been a fucking dragon. I have been talking flower. I have been water. And it's all make believe. Just have fun and be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And who cares? Who cares? Just like don't be weird. Don't be dumb. Just be nice. Just be nice. Huh? I get so mad.
So, in the meantime, before we get everyone to that point, what are things that we as a theater can do to kind of start that push towards like normalizing these sort of things, so that it doesn't present itself in such a like "Wah, gay," why does it immediately have to be about that? Like, what can we do as a theater, as a community, as a director to normalize that stuff? Yes, Thomas.
Hire more queer people. I have more to say, but that's for right now. Yeah, the number one thing I think to do is to get more people, not just in the room, but in leadership positions. There's so few. There's still an absorbently large number of people who are in power, who are cis white males, who are straight. That's not the case in all around, and it's slowly changing, but that is the majority of a lot of different things in a lot of different places. And we're fighting against a history of a long, path throughout most of improv, of which that has been the case primarily for the people who have been training other people. And I think this is just in general on how to go and get more diversity in the room. It's just like so few people have somebody that they can be like, oh, that's a person who's just like me, who's now teaching this class that I'm in, rather than, okay, this person has no idea what I'm talking about or the point that I'm trying to make, or me bringing up how horrible what you just said was, and you're the teacher. And so to have more people who have that kind of representation, not just in the room, but in the room who are leaders, because there's so many queer people, just like we're all, washing dishes and doing all their normal stuff. There's so many queer people who are great leaders, who are great improvisers, who are great improv teachers, who need to be given that chance. And a lot of times they are not, for a very number of reasons, but mostly is because they're not fitting into the model of which improv has been existing in for a large period of time. So I think one of the very almost immediate things that you can do is hire more queer people, hire more trans people, hire more people of color, hire all these people who are not been given the opportunity, and let them have it. Because it's even like, if you think about it, when you have all these auditions, you're like, well, you should have at least a year's worth of improv experience. How do you get that experience when you are an underrepresented group who has problems holding a job because society doesn't want you to have a well-paying job where you can have that spare income to take these classes? It becomes a huge hurdle. Everything that you're doing with inside this art form that we're doing has all of these kind of obstacles that we should be actively working on to dismantle. And I think one of the best ways to do it is to just get more people who don't look like you, who don't belong to the same groups as you, not only in the room, but on teams. I think, throughout majority of the teams that I have been assigned with through audition have been primarily white, have been primarily cis, and because you can't, most of the times have been primarily straight unless it's specifically designated as a group that we're, auditioning for. I've auditioned for a trans and non-binary group at Second City and things like that. So we have these types of things, but still in those kind of rare instances, it doesn't kind of roll over into the overall system. It kind of be a segregated kind of like, here's the bubble that you can exist in, and that is it. You can't be part of the overall conversation of the world. That's part of what I think that you're doing and the comic sports are doing, which is really great, is that bringing us in to have this part of a conversation, to let us kind of have our voices be heard and saying, hey, this is something that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about. Here are ways that we think that we can have it changed. But I think the number one reason is there's so many people who don't have access to this space, to this room right at this moment, and they need to be given that opportunity to do so, not just as like a here's a thing for you to do off to the side so we feel good as a company to do so, but fold them into the actual part of the existing part of our culture that we have.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is you're right. And it's that is a hill to climb. I will tell you, the last few years have been very educational for me, just in regards to like, creating and I don't even want to say a safe space, but creating a comfortable space, creating a space where people feel like they can, talk and be able to kind of air their grievances and not feel like they're gonna have some sort of retribution because of it. Like, we need to break this stuff first so that we can move on to newer stuff. So it's been it's been humbling is the thing that I can say the most. Is things are like, why didn't I think of this? I've been doing this for so long. I'm very much at that place of like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I saved nothing.
I think you're doing a lot better than you think you are,
I don't know any other theaters that are having these talks. I mean, maybe they are and I just haven't tuned in, but this is awesome. To answer the question about what more can the theater do, just to touch back on the thing I was saying earlier about how illuminating it was for me to take that workshop. Why haven't the other classes I've taken at other theaters like mentioned that this was possible for people like us and people of other marginalized groups to more fully incorporate into the curriculum that this is a place where things like that are possible, that this is an art form where things like defending yourself and standing up for yourself, so that maybe eventually we don't all have to improvise defensively as queer people. It is often just like 5 minutes at the start of the first class of the term where the conversation is, everybody cool? We're all going to be cool to each other, right? Okay, cool. Let's talk about improv now. And I think it would be awesome for more theaters to integrate more smoothly throughout the entire time you're taking classes, that this is a place where we can afford to stand up for ourselves and to expand out fully into the stage that we're occupying.
Kelsey?
Yes to all of those things. I think one other thing for me is a lot of times a lot of people pat themselves on the back for doing like the bare minimum, or they like make jokes about how like non-diverse it is. And it's like, although, yes, but let's do better. I think like a lot of times people are like, look, we hired a bunch of queer women. They're all white and they're all cis, but we did it. And it's like, you know what? I go through struggles as a white person, or not a white person. Oh my God, why did I just say that? Absolutely not. I go through struggles as a woman, not as a white person at all.
Roll the clip, Louise. Roll the clip. This is good.
I'm gonna roll that 3 times in a row. Is Kelsey Myers saying, I go through struggles as a white woman?
I don't go through struggles as a white person You know what? I go through struggles as a white person, or not a white person. You know what? I go through struggles as a white person, or not a person at all. As a woman, absolutely. As a queer person, absolutely. Nowhere near the level that trans people go through, nowhere near the level that any of my like friends of color go through. Like yeah, you got to hire those any one of those diversity points, but it's like it's still like not enough. You have to just do more. Like people learn, like when I go to a show, I learn just by being in that audience, being like, how cool is that? How normal is that? Look at that. It's possible, everybody. And I think comedy sports is getting a lot better at that. At being just like, this is normal. We're doing this. Just like I said, Jason being like, this is just a normal show. There's just a lot of queer people today. Isn't that great? But it's still a normal show. You can do that all the time. Like one of my favorite shows to see in Chicago was the Geraldo, and they never spoke English once. And it was the coolest show I have ever seen in my life, and I would see them every chance that I got. Did I know what they were saying a lot of the time? Not really, but it was still a really good show and a really cool opportunity to see something like that. Mm-hmm. And you don't need to like speak Spanish to see that, but it's still very important to go watch that happen. And similar to just watching a normal improv show, I think just holding people accountable as a performer, as running a theater, not being afraid to be like, that's not cool, or as a performer, I'm not going to do that because people are going to watch. I used to go to improv shows and like take notes. Like I would have written that in my notes and been like, I'm going to do that next time. And I'm going to, stand up for myself or stand up for somebody else when I see that happening. More importantly, I'm going to, because that feeling is so helpless that I think just the minute you stand up for yourself, but more importantly, somebody else, those things is like the snowball effect of like getting rid of all that bullshit that I think is super important.
All right. Well, believe it or not, we are coming up on our time. I know this goes by very fast. But I think that's a great place to wrap this up. This, of course, is a great first conversation, and I think this is a conversation that obviously we need to have within the community, but also intermingled with everyone else, because that to me is, I think, the bigger ultimate goal. Because I love conversations like this, but as we've seen a few times today, with conversations within the group like this, at a certain point, we all reach a point of just like, yup, I agree. And it's like, well, where's
and of course,
like the next step is intermingle, get everyone here, have the conversation together, have those awkward moments where we can push through those and get through those and really get to the meat and potatoes of what we should be talking about. We're getting there. But Kelsey, Thomas, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time. This is a great conversation. You all have some fantastic thoughts and points of views on this, so we will definitely be circling back. If I haven't gotten a chance to do an individual one-on-one with you, we will be doing that soon because I do very much want to sit down with everybody, so keep an eye out for that email. Everyone out there, thank you so much for watching. Please check out all the other DNI talks on our YouTube channel. Please also check out Comedy Sports on Twitch. We are the CSZN. We are the Comedy Sports Network on Twitch. We also have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter. We have an Instagram. Please find all of those and check us out at czchicago.com. We have programming 6 days a week, except for Tuesdays. That's when we rehearse. But check out the website for information on all of that, and we will see you next time at the very next Comedy Sports Chicago's DNI Talks.